A lot of stuff on that earnings call. I have a few things I want to share with you after I slept on it last night. And yeah, I'll just start going down the list. So the first thing that stuck out to me was that Elon was in a good mood. And usually when Elon's in a good mood, good things happen. Good things seem to happen for the stock, for the company. So I think his mood is a direct correlation to how his companies are performing, and him being, pretty cheery. He was chuckling at different comments being made there. There was an F-bomb that was dropped on the call at some point, and Elon was just laughing it off. So those are some positive things to keep in mind. And I know it's not really quantifiable, but when the CEO or leader of a company is in a good mood, that tends to mean that the things he's working on are probably going right. So that was a positive. The second big takeaway for me is that Tesla was very open about how supply constrained 2021 was for their production, which is within the context of Q4 2021, which was a blowout expectation for deliveries. So if you remember, they delivered 308,000 cars in that quarter. And a lot of bulls or people that were very positive on the company were expecting like 275, 280 around that area, and they still blew it out of the water. And with the guidance that they were constrained, right? So in their heads, Tesla's thinking that the 308,000 number for Q4 was likely well below what they thought they could actually do if everything was in place from a supply chain perspective. The implications for that for 2022 are massive. And there was a little nugget that was dropped on the call where Zach and the team, so Zach, the CFO, and the team feel that Tesla can get to 1.5 million cars with just Fremont and Shanghai alone, right? And there was some guidance on the letter that was given that said they expect Fremont to go well above 600,000 cars per year potentially, which is probably a little bit of a sandbag. So that was a very, very, very interesting comment. So they don't really need Austin and Berlin to get to 50% growth rate year over year. And if you layer that on top of it, so based on the guidance that they were giving us on the call, both Berlin and Austin should go live in Q1 with production, then the implications for that for 2022 deliveries are pretty large. So 1.5 million seems to be the absolute minimum deliveries that they can do outside of any factors. And as the supply chain alleviates and as they get supply into the doors, then that number should go higher and higher and higher. On one of my previous videos, I expect Tesla to do about 1.75 million cars in 2022. And, if everything goes well, it seems like that target's well within reach. The next thing that stuck out to me is how bullish Elon was on full self-driving. He talked about it constantly. He kept reframing questions around future deliveries in the next few years into, hey, but you're not thinking about this right. You're not thinking about the impact of full self-driving. And when you have cars that are 5 times more capable or have 5 times more utilization, meaning instead of a usual car where you might drive around, say for 1 or 2 hours a day, if you have full self-driving, this thing can drive around and, help make deliveries or help move people around. No one's thinking about that. That's the framing he would always put those questions in. So what that tells me is that his confidence for full self-driving is at an all-time high. So if you thought he was confident about full self-driving before, he seems way more confident about it now. So I don't know if there's some internal data that they're seeing that leads them to believe that 2022 is the year, but that's the framing he's coming out with. And now with full self-driving being live for, at least I think a year now, about 60,000 beta drivers out and about. It looks like that was a number that was dropped on the call. It looks like all the different factors that could really make this thing come alive are there, and it's just a matter of time. The hint was dropped on the call that Dojo is not really needed to get to full self-driving. It's just a matter of a data exercise now. It's just collecting data, letting the systems and the algorithms they have and the GPU clusters do their work, and then it will say, hey, yep, this is how the car should drive. So very, 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 very exciting. I think really what we need to see is legitimate use cases where full self-driving is actually being useful and replacing things like Uber, things like Lyft. I think once that comes to light and it's a legitimate thing that exists, I think that's when the broader markets will realize that. And then once the broader markets realize that, that's when the stock price should follow suit, right? But until we get there, I'm still slightly hesitant, but his excitement was infectious. It's hard not to be excited about his excitement, right? So yeah, that was a big thing for me on the call, and I'm excited for full self-driving. Let's see if it pans out this year. The next thing that stuck out to me is the margin implications for 2022. So the constant Feedback around supply chain issues was obviously a big factor. They had to expedite a lot of parts to be sent between facilities to make sure that they're getting the parts in place to make the cars. But then there's also talk about full self-driving becoming a bigger part of the mix. And then obviously with 4680 batteries going live in Austin, that's also going to drive the cost of manufacturing down and localization of those parts as well, right? So if Austin's starting to ship cars to the East Coast instead of Fremont, that's way less logistics cost, way less time from getting a car to the customer. So, your cash flows a little bit easier. There's a lot of margin implications as well when it comes to that localization. So that was very exciting to see. And that just keeps sort of going through that same narrative that Tesla's margins are going to continue to improve year after year after year, and getting that very solid guidance on the call was very exciting. The next thing is the HVAC system. So cooling and heating for homes. One of the comments on the call was that, they already do it for cars, and the cooling and heating for a car is way harder, at least they make it seem, than building a system for the house, because you don't really have space limitations per se. So that was kind of exciting to hear. Basically, what that tells me is that if Tesla decides to get into the cooling and heating game for homes, they should have a very easy ramp to get that going. And, the way Tesla approaches innovation and the way they make products, you would think that those products are going to be significantly better than anything else that's out there today. So if Tesla ever decides to get into the heating and cooling game for homes, which it seems like they will at some point, it should be a slam dunk, and that's something nobody's talking about. So what does that do to the valuation? That's very, very interesting. And then along the lines with that as well, energy, battery storage, solar, it's still not really part of the conversation, right? So everything that Tesla is especially from a market perspective, is cars. And maybe we're starting to get into this full self-driving talks a little bit more nowadays. But the energy part of the business is still basically non-existent, right? So that's all upside. Once a lot of those challenges alleviate as far as getting the energy part of the business up and running, then we should see the market realize that more and more through the stock price or what have you. So that was still very interesting to me. Energy is still almost like a redheaded stepchild to the entire business. But, as supply constraints alleviate and they're able to get more batteries flowing into that part of the business, that part of the business should continue to explode. One of the comments that was very, very interesting on the call was that Zach, I believe it was on the call, said that, hey, energy right now might grow 50% year over year. But if we really wanted to match demand from a supply perspective, we could see 200%, 300% growth, right? So the guidance there is that there's just so much pent up demand for these products, but they just don't have the supply chain set up yet to get to that demand. So very interesting stuff. The stock still doesn't have energy baked into it based on those statements, I think. And so that's going to be a very interesting development in the coming quarters. The other thing that stuck out to me is that all new product releases will be delayed until 2023. So Cybertruck, I guess semi, maybe not. That's a weird one because we're seeing some videos and pictures of the semis going around. Maybe they'll do it in very limited production and then they'll roll it out further in 2023. Things like Roadster, a $25,000 car, all these things are going to be delayed to 2023 and later, which means that Tesla is really just focusing on ramping up production today. So Austin, Berlin, Fremont, Shanghai, that's their primary focus. And that focus will 100% lead to better margins, because when they're really focusing on that part of the business, all they're really saying is, hey, we're going to maximize our ability to get these products out through our existing manufacturing plants, which essentially means that the fixed costs that they have, the money they spent to build these things, they're going to use that money to crank even more things out of those factories, which means that the dollars they get from those additional things will go into the bottom line, will go into margin. So that's going to be yet another lever for margin this year. And so that's how we should think about 2022. 2022 is really the year of Tesla becoming a cash generating juggernaut, right? Profit juggernaut. That's really what 2022 is for Tesla. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the market reacts to that. Then the next thing that really stuck out to me was the Tesla bot, Optimus Subprime, as Elon likes to call him. I'm really surprised that it was such a big part of the discussion on the call. And it could be because Elon, he was away from the call for 1 quarter and he's excited to get back out there and talk about the things that he's working on. But I was really surprised by the focus that Tesla really wanted to place on that product. It was mentioned that the Tesla bot could potentially be Tesla's biggest product ever, really, right? Redefining what it means to work, redefining what it means to utilize labor to get stuff done. That's pretty insane. The implications of that are completely nuts if you really, if you fast forward. say decades into the future. I did have a model that I built that I link somewhere in the video here, where I expect there to be 100 million bots manufactured per year by 2035. And the focus that the bot was already getting on the call in 2022, how it's already being mentioned as being a transformational product, really gave me a lot of conviction behind that thought process, is that long term, this bot could be the thing when we think about the future and when we think about what the future could look like, the Jetsons, right? All these different images and imagery that we have in our head of what a good future looks like potentially. That bot is going to be basically the genesis, right? It's going to be the thing that's going to get us there. Most likely, it's going to alleviate labor that is difficult to do, that is dangerous, that it's repetitive, boring. And that labor is very expensive. If you really think about it, what percentage of the labor in the world is really driven by jobs that are dangerous, repetitive, boring, but are still extremely valuable, right? And there's a reason why they exist. The bot could replace all of those. Right? The bot could replace all of those. So what the hell does that mean? And so I think it's important for all of us to really start thinking about what are the implications of that, right? I don't think it can be ignored. Usually if Elon and Tesla say they're going to do something, it happens. It's late sometimes, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's early, right? Now they're in this weird position where sometimes they're early, sometimes they're late, right? But I would not bet against somebody like an Elon when it comes to really seeing the future and where we're heading, right? And what's even more interesting is when they were talking about the bot, they were lumping it in with Cybertruck, Semi, Roadster as new products that would come out 2023. So they were kind of listed out in a row, which means, is the bot going to go into trial production next year? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the case or not, if that's what they meant to say. But there was some talk about, hey, we're going to use this thing internally first, that it's done right, and that people do find value in it before we sell it to everybody else. So expect these bots to start coming out for Tesla, for Tesla use, whatever that means, as early as next year, potentially. And what the implications of that are for Tesla is better margins, right? You get to either replace labor that would have been more expensive to do something, or what's most likely for Tesla is to add labor so that it enables them to move even faster, right? And to do it at a very, very, very cost efficient way, rather. So implications for the bot are nuts. I got to keep thinking about it. I think there is a lot of near-term impacts from the bot that are probably not being thought about too well right now because it's such a new and foreign concept. But yeah, it blew my mind. And I'm very, very excited about the implications of it. What it really tells me is that Tesla is really just an AI company now. It's officially an AI company. If you're looking at Tesla as a car company, this is not the right way of looking at the company. I would even argue, even looking at it as a manufacturing company, it's probably not the right way of looking at it. It's some sort of weird hybrid where AI is really starting to become the driving force behind where Tesla is heading to the future. And what's really interesting about that is that what other company is doing that? What other company has this weird merging of like manufacturing and AI? And then you throw transportation and energy generation on top of it. All these crazy, multiple, massive industries with this brand new industry and AI being the leading sort of this like push to bring all these things into the future. It's really, really interesting. And I haven't really spent as much time as I should thinking about what the future implications are for that. But that mix of industries and that leading force of AI means something, and it's unique. No one else is doing that. If someone says Ford and GM is Tesla's competition, I'm going to lose it. They don't have competition. A company that competes with Tesla within the realms that Tesla is in does not exist. It's so unique. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be this perfect company that is going to execute 100% of the time. But the uniqueness of the company is so strange and it's so weird. And I'm really curious to see how the market's going to react to that long term. Its potential is nuts, especially if they really execute on the bot portion of it. Anyway, I don't want to keep rambling on this point, but just completely nuts. I'm very excited about it. I'm sure you are too, but I would love to hear about your opinions as well about the bot. Like, does the bot make you feel excited? Does it make you feel weary? Does it make you feel like, okay, here goes Elon again with his usual hype up stuff, potentially with some of these things? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on that. And so really to summarize, what are the impacts for 2022? What are the impacts for 2023? What's really interesting now is that Tesla seems to be in this unstoppable growth trajectory where they're growing really massively into this EV market it's basically at its infancy, right? There's barely any take rate, especially compared to gas cars or ICE vehicles. It's a 7% market share. That's 93% of the market that's still not EV. That is Tesla's market to dominate in, okay? But really, the true implications of Tesla are not really just how many cars can we sell. It's how many full self-driving units can we get out there so that everybody is being driven around in a self-driving car. So what are the implications of that? Batteries for storage and solar, right? They're barely talking about it, but it's a ginormous opportunity for them. What are the implications of that, right? And then you layer in this AI thing, this AI variable that is so ginormous from a potential perspective, and the bot and full self-driving as well. And then they're going to start talking about it more, and it's going to become a bigger part of their business. And they're going to start trialing these things here in the near term and definitely in the long term. What are the implications of that, right? And then so you take that and you compare that to what is the broader conversation around Tesla from a stock or a company perspective. It seems like there's a gigantic gap in understanding. And it sort of reminds me of 2012, 2013. Back then, when people were following Tesla, it was, oh my God, Tesla's not going to make profit. They're trying to make an EV. It's not going to work. It's going to fail. And then, 8 years later, they're the dominant EV force. They're selling more luxury cars in some markets than, established companies like BMW and Mercedes, and they're just getting started, right? And then this bot AI variable is not really being talked about in a broader sense, in a broader public perspective. Like right now, if you go talk to somebody on the street about Tesla, they'll usually be like, yeah, Elon's cool. I like the Model S. It's a cool car. They're not saying, oh yeah, they're building this thing that's going to completely redefine what labor means, right, in the bot. And so how long is that going to take for people to catch up to, right? How long is that going to take for folks to be like, oh my God, that's what Tesla is going to be? That's where we're heading. We've started on that path. This call is the official start, in my opinion, of Tesla being an AI company. And any conversations that are had around Tesla where that is not part of the discussion, they're missing a gigantic long-term variable that is so hard to model right now, but is absolutely going to be part of the equation. And ultimately, that's what has me the most excited. I can't believe that I got a chance to work at a company that could potentially redefine labor, right? That is completely nuts. And then all of us in the investment community that are really big on Tesla, are we really thinking about the long-term implications of this? And if we are, how long is it going to take to get here, right? What are the clues that we're going to look after from Tesla and from other developments that are happening that are going to say, hey, this is the path that we're going towards, right? It's going to be super fun. I can't wait to read it. I can't wait to read into it. I can't wait to research it. I can't wait to see it develop, because if there's one company that can do it as Tesla, if there's one leader that can get us there as Elon, and if there's a workforce or talent that can ultimately execute on this, is the team at Tesla that I had such a pleasure of working with. And I'm ultimately super confident that if this is a path that Elon wants us to go on from a company perspective, then it's going to get done. It might not get done tomorrow, but it's going to get done. And that's what I'm ultimately most excited about. If you like what you saw, I would appreciate it if you throw me a like. If you want to see more stuff from me, feel free to subscribe. You can join me on my Patreon by becoming a patron by clicking on the link in the description. And you can also join the channel by clicking on join right below this video. And then I also have a podcast series available on this channel, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy. Bye-bye.